are at the MMA Hangout, has made it big time. We're in the studio. Look at this. We got our own logo back here. We're doing stuff big. And for the return to the studio, we had to talk and bring into the GOAT. The first person that I wanted to have in studio, again, he's at his house in Boca Raton, but Jon Anik, the return of the GOAT to the MMA Hangout. Jon, what's up, brother? Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm not worthy of the introduction. Please don't call me the GOAT. But it's great to be with you. I mean, your studio is outstanding. You got a director like cutting shots and cutting angles here early on. So we're all in. It's good to be with you. And obviously, we got a lot of big things here in front of us coming up in Boston in a few days. So we're excited.
So we're going to get to 292 in a second. But the last time I talked to you, it was pre-287, which was a great card. And the UFC has been on an absolute tear in 2023. Even starting from the one in Brazil, you got the one more sleep shirt from Brazil in 283. Then Volk versus Makhachev 284, 285 with John Jones, Alexa Gross, like all of the stuff that's been happening. Can you put it into perspective? You've been doing this for so long. Is 2023, we're not even done with it yet, is it the greatest fight year that you can remember?
Well, I guess I would just say, and keep in mind, the promotion cuts my check, so whatever that's worth, I don't know. But I really do believe, and I know you're aligned with this, there are 13 to 14 Super Bowls a year. The NFL has one, and the UFC has these 12 or 13 pay-per-views that to me all feel monstrous. So when somebody asks me, oh, are you excited for Madison Square Garden in November? I'm excited for every numbered pay-per-view card that the UFC puts forth, whether I'm the lead play-by-play voice or not. Like, I will be buying every numbered pay-per-view as long as I live. So I say that with complete sincerity as just a sports fan and a rabid UFC fan. But this year has been particularly special. The month of July with UFC 290 and UFC 291 back-to-back was just absurd. And Dana White wanted to bring a big card to Boston, and he waited to do a pay-per-view in Boston, and that is our next initiative. And it's just been one big hit after the next. So we're very excited, and not just for New York, but every god-darn pay-per-view on the schedule the rest of the way in 2023.
To put into perspective for those of you still getting into UFC and you've been seeing these fights, like if you started paying attention to UFC in 290, like it was one of the best cards of the year, one of the best cards we've seen in a long time. 2 title fights, Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez, Pantoja versus Moreno. Jon, when you called those, did you feel like you were in the midst of something special with those 2 fights?
Yeah, for sure. And you and I were talking a little bit off the air about International Fight Week and everything that week holds for us promotionally, Hall of Fame induction ceremony, strategically building out a fight card that really is bulletproof to injury and everything else. UFC 290 at its final iteration was just absurd, right? And you end up losing a fight here or there. But Dricus du Plessis beating Robert Whittaker, when you have a singular result like that, that just shifts the whole axis of a division, and all of a sudden, instead of Whittaker pining for a third fight with Adesanya or really positioning himself in this best version, and all of a sudden, you know, this dude from South Africa that's just an effing hoss comes in and just takes away everything. It's a tremendous sport. It's the greatest unpredictable theater. And yeah, I mean, certainly those 2 title fights followed up that fight, even if that night might be remembered for Dricus du Plessis. But one of my ESPN producers, Charlie Moynihan, suggested after the Volkanovski performance that, you know, this dude might be the greatest of all time in the not too distant future. And sometimes people don't like when we have that conversation, but Alexander Volkanovski at a time, it was like, man, how's he going to become the greatest featherweight of all time with Jose Aldo and Max Holloway? And it's like, check that box. How does he become the greatest mixed martial arts athlete of all time? Well, longevity, title defenses, and he's well on his way.
Moving on to 291, Salt Lake City, same building, same kick, same result, headshot, bang. When that happened, and I don't think anybody, especially not Dustin Poirier, but I don't think anybody saw the head kick coming from Justin Gaethje. When that head kick blew through the defense and knocked out Dustin Poirier, I was in Key West on a buddy's bachelor party, and I said, hey, I don't care what we do the whole weekend. We are watching 291. I went to this like seedy dive bar that was playing it. It was me and like a bunch of people just going crazy. That head kick. Same building, you called it when Leon Edwards did it to Kamaru Usman. And again, Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier put us there.
So the second time it happened, right, I'm not thinking Salt Lake City. I'm not thinking Leon Edwards at that point in time. Certainly it's nice in the preamble. But the perfect call might have been like headshot bang. You got to be kidding me, right? Like that would have been the perfect time to maybe trot out that headshot bang call in reference and nod to Leon Edwards. But we talk about these moments where maybe you're hunkering down for more MMA action, or not 25 minutes, but I always bring up Zhang Wei Li against Rose Namajunas when Rose Namajunas kicked her head into eternity. And you think you're settling in for a 25-minute war, and the next thing you know, you're trying to cap a title fight, in this case, a BMF fight. Not that I felt like we were necessarily going to get 25 minutes out of Gaethje and Poirier, but for Justin to do that in that setting, he was so relaxed, and I think there was so much confidence accrued in his win over Rafael Fiziev at UFC 286 not all that long ago. I think he reaped the benefits of being in an active competition cycle, which isn't always his norm. Mm-hmm. He trains at altitude. He was very confident in the matchup, the rematch, just a humongous win. And Salt Lake City, it looks like maybe it's a 3-fight deal, and we would actually go back there for a third successive year, and they're getting like pay-per-views and not fight nights, so it's a big deal. Utah is becoming increasingly a fight town. Not that it wasn't before, but they've had a lot of big UFC moments, and I know a lot of other fight towns that are getting fight nights would like their numbered cards for sure.
Imagine you've got 2 big moments in that same card. Derrick Lewis with the flying knee out of the gate on his final fight in his UFC deal, now just inked another 8-fight deal. That I did not see that coming. I did not see that flying knee coming whatsoever.
Nor did Marcos Rogerio Pesao de Lima, who can't fucking chew 3 weeks later.
He says his teeth are still hurting and they're still loose.
So it's so interesting. Dominic Cruz is one of my best friends, and we've seen Aaron Donald of the Rams and others train with like knives coming at them. You know, Dominic Cruz's mentality was always that whomever the opponent, those aren't fists coming at you. Those are like swords taking your head off. So from Dominic's standpoint, it's like, dude, just move your head off the center line. Like, no matter if it's the first strike or whatever, if you think someone's going to touch gloves, and to all fighters out there, if you happen to be watching us, no more touching gloves at this point. We've seen it too many times. We just saw one of the fastest knockouts in mixed martial arts history. You don't know if these guys are going to touch or whatever. That was insane, though. And I do feel bad for Pesao, who at 38, 39 years old had finally built up this momentum to contend. And the next thing you know, he needs his jaw wired shut. Hopefully that's not the case, but tremendous win for a seemingly motivated Derrick Lewis. And his bankroll's pretty fat, and it's about to get fatter. Good for him.
Good for him. And now we move on to the main event this weekend, UFC 292 in Boston. I had to wear my Heat hat. I know you see it. I know you're a big Boston guy living in South Florida. Yeah. I just had to, make sure that we were repping the home team over here. I'm sorry about that. But put us in. Sean Sugar O'Malley contending for the Bantamweight Championship against Aljamain Sterling, who is just on a tear right now. I was in the building for 286 versus him and Henry Cejudo. I was actually sitting ringside with the media, and it's the closest I've ever been in an MMA fight. And it is such a different experience being that close, John. I didn't realize it because I usually watch everything high atop from the perch of media, but I was there ringside. I was right behind Henry's corner, and it was incredible.
Yeah, our live events are pretty special, and I do see the Miami Heat hat, and I will say, as a Boston sports fan who's about to go back to the hub, that Game 7 loss by the Celtics to the Heat, congratulations, by the way, was the worst Boston sports loss I've experienced since Aaron Boone's home run in the 2003 American League Championship Series.
Bigger than David Tyree helmet catch?
Well, I don't know. That Tyree helmet catch might have preceded. That was 07. No, you're right. No, because I guess they had won. Like, dude, the Red Sox hadn't won, so the Boone home run supersedes that, Thankfully, Jimmy Butler still has no rings, but Sean O'Malley, Aljamain Sterling is what we're talking about, not Jimmy Butler. I do have a lot of respect for Jimmy Butler. I got to be careful dodging bullets down here in South Florida, right? But 0 rings for Jimmy Butler, at least right now, as we sit here, August 2023. Anyway, this is a fascinating fight. And the narrative, of course, is that Sean O'Malley has to avoid the grappling game at all costs. He has never faced a grappler like Aljamain Sterling, who may or may not be the greatest bantamweight of all time, but he's won 9 fights in a row, and he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, who's an underrated striker, despite being just this phenomenal beast of a grappler, human backpack, suffocator, all of that, right? the less talked about angle is that Sean O'Malley is a striker unlike anything Aljamain Sterling has ever seen, and every MMA round begins on the feet. What will Sean O'Malley be able to do with the showcase? I don't know, but he's had a lot of grappling heavy training camps. He's been building for this moment. He hasn't fought since he beat the then #1 contender Petr Yan last October. So he's had a lot of time to prepare for Aljamain Sterling and has the right people in theory around him. It's just hard to close these wrestling and grappling gaps, and it's hard to keep Aljamain Sterling off of your legs. Heaven forbid he gets on your back. So it'll be interesting to see how the strength discrepancy or lack thereof plays out if Aljamain Sterling is able to get the fight to the floor. But you can be sure Sterling and his folks are very mindful of the first 10 minutes and all of O'Malley's danger. And I think he's a problem that Sterling hasn't seen before. So we'll see what he can do with a huge opportunity. And it's got a Boston backdrop, and we can't effing wait.
John, speaking about Sterling, I know that Sterling trained under the famed Ray Longo, and I'm wondering, do you owe Ray Longo any money?
I probably do owe Ray Longo money. Sometimes we will give him like $250 initiatives, like, hey, by the way, you got 2 guys fighting at UFC 292. If they win, there will be $500 extra in the 6 to 8 times we pay the man every year. So do I owe him money? I think you'd have to ask him, my man.
I think he would always say, yes, Jon Anik owes me money.
I feel like a lot of people owe Ray Longo money.
So I'll give a little bit of backstory. So we have you guys, the Anik and Florian podcast. We have it on DK Network here at the studio. It's usually on in the mornings when we're getting ready with our pre-meeting for the show. And we're always surprised and always excited to see Ray Longo, because Ray looks like a guy who is cut of the same jib as our guy Stugotz. They're both kind of New York, New Jersey guys. You don't really know where they're getting their money from. They probably sold a couple lemon cars back in the day. And then I saw your post on Instagram where Ray was getting a haircut, brought out a wad of cash, double rubber banded up, no wallet, straight cash, and then gave it I sent it to Lewis because we were both fascinated with Ray. We need to meet him at some point. I don't know how we can set that up. But it was like, yes, this is exactly what we thought it was, and it's true.
He had the crisscross pattern on the rubber bands. He had the grip, the dually grip on the rubber bands,
Fat
dude.
stack.
He's going to absolutely love watching this back, by the way. But yes, we asked him, we probed him about it this week on the Anik and Florian podcast. And yes, he does carry like a couple G's, as you might expect, all $100 bills. But the man is an absolute legend, and needless to say, he's got a big weekend in front of him. But this all originated organically on our podcast. As someone who now gives himself a skin fade, I was just asking what he tipped his barber.
Right.
And he suggested that he didn't tip his barber. I'm like, what are you
At
talking
all?
about? You don't tip the fucking barber. So that's how this originated. So it's always like these Ray Longo Minutemen on our show, like coming at me, like I'm coming at Ray Longo. I just asked organically if he tipped his barber. He suggested not. And then I later found out she trained at the gym. So then he does this video for the masses where he pulls out a wad, gives her $100 that she, puts between her breasts. And somehow I'm the bad guy.
Yeah, that was
I'm
crazy.
Just looking out for
that was
people.
crazy.
Ray Longo, man, what a guy. We love seeing him every time he's on. We're like, yes, we have to watch whatever it is, and it's on mute, so we actually don't even know what he's saying because we're in the middle of a meeting. But we're glued or fixated on the TV when Ray comes on. John, thank you so much for hanging out. 292 is going to be incredible. Make sure to get the pay-per-view. John's going to be on that. DC and Joe, right?
Yes, sir.
Huge. It's always bigger when you guys are on. The feeling is just so
buddy.
huge when you guys are on. So we've got that. One More Sleep. Go check that out. What's the website for that, John?
Millions.co. Thank you for that. And thanks to everybody for supporting the podcast. It means a whole lot. And we'll see what these New Yorkers can do. And by the way, the reason Longo's on our podcast is that the show is hosted by 2 Bostonians. So I had to balance it out a little bit. But I don't root for these New Yorkers, at least in my heart, even if they're Longo's guys. So
Jon Anik, the GOAT. Thanks for joining us.